Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, when strolling in parks or squares, you could be forgiven for thinking that they're all publicly owned. But more and more public spaces are being bought by private companies, and although the public is still allowed to use them, there are restrictions. In a moment, I'll be speaking to Will Self, who will be speaking out against this tomorrow, and the Conservative MP from Croydon South, Chris Philp, a member of the Treasury's Select Committee. But first this. It might look like a public space, but this square and the land around City Hall, where the Mayor of London works, is actually privately owned. The St Martin's Property Corporation of Kuwait, as it happens, snapped it up in 2013 for £1.7 billion, one of the largest commercial property deals in British history. Tomorrow, a group will meet in this very place to raise awareness about what the loss of a public space like this means to all of us. This square, right next to St Paul's Cathedral, houses the London Stock Exchange, and you might also think it is a public space, but you'd be wrong. It's actually owned by the Mitsubishi Estate Company of Japan, and so governed by corporate bylaws, not by the law of the land. When Occupy London targeted it in 2011, they were stopped by police and a High Court injunction was granted against public access to the square, defining it as private property. Newly developed Granary Square in King's Cross also appears to be public, but it isn't. You can hang out here, but its owners can also ask you to stop congregating in a large group, stop taking photographs, oh yes, and forget about protesting. More and more of these privately owned public spaces are springing up all over the country. So how public are they? Well, Conservative MP Chris Philp is in his South London constituency, Croydon South, and with me is the author Will Self. Thank you to both of you for coming in on a Friday evening. Well, let me start with you, because you're very engaged in this issue. You've got this meeting happening tomorrow, this gathering. What is wrong with strolling through, you know, the Berkeley Garden or the Viagra Square if it looks good?
I think the problem is that so much of our time in modern urban existence is defined by a very simple metric: time and money. And it seeps into our consciousness. And when we're constantly moving around in spaces that are privately controlled, which is in essence monetizing the space, there's a subconscious awareness of that. It's just like nowadays when you go into a hospital and there's a major kind of franchise selling coffee in the lobby. You know, it undercuts your sense of a public provision. But if the alternative is not being able to walk in that space at all because it's a dump or it's a waste ground or it's surrounded by barbed wire because the municipality can't be bothered to clean it up, surely this is better, isn't it? Well, no, it's not a good alternative. And why does it have to be the alternative? That's not a positive way of looking at it. You know, things we have are called commons, and because they're held in common. And there are all sorts of projects starting where people, even in urban contexts, manage things as part of the community and part of the communality, and that's far better. It needn't all be prettified like the spaces we saw, which frankly, to my way of thinking, do look like corporate spaces. We can have other kinds of public space. We all grew up in cities, or people of our generation, that had them. Let's turn to Chris Philp there. Well, you heard it from Will Self, too prettified, too many corporate potted plants, and you can't do what you like, so they're not really common spaces.
Well, I think it's worth remembering why they came to exist in this form in the first place. Almost all the spaces we just talked about were originally brownfield sites or even derelict land which were purchased by developers. Large-scale development took place, and as part of that large-scale development, public spaces were created. It's not as if private companies are going around buying up town squares or buying up parks from the council or the government. They're creating these spaces in the first place. And if you think about examples like Paternoster Square by St Paul's Cathedral, or the open space around City Hall by HMS Belfast in London, they actually look really good. They're really well maintained, they're really well kept. And you know, frankly, they're really nice places to be, nicer than many equivalent council-owned places. And if, for example, you took that space around City Hall on the south bank of the Thames and transferred it to Southwark Council, which is the local authority, the expense of maintaining that space would suddenly fall on the public taxpayer. So to be honest, providing the space is well maintained, providing there's access to it, and providing it's something everyone can enjoy, which I think is the case for all of these different areas, I've got no problem at all with it. And let's not forget the most fundamental point, the land we're talking about would simply be derelict brownfield land in many cases, were it not for these people who have taken time and money to develop it in the first place.
But aren't those examples the exception? Because a lot of these public spaces were public spaces. They might not have looked as pretty as they look now, and some people might even prefer that. And the point is that if I wanted to film there as a journalist, I wouldn't be allowed to do it because the company would say, verboten. If I wanted to stand on a soapbox and give a little speech, I wouldn't be allowed to do that. So it's not a free public space anymore, is it?
Well, I've seen a lot of journalists outside City Hall filming, and that is one of the public... In fact, that is the public space, I think, where Will is going to be protesting tomorrow. So I don't think there's a filming restriction. Certainly, I've seen plenty of camera crews out there filming.
There is a filming restriction. They'll be under some arrangement.
But
actually,
case,
you know what? Aren't you a property developer yourself?
Flouted.
Isn't that how you made your wad out of property development?
Well, before I came into Parliament nearly a year ago, I was involved in funding different construction projects.
Are you not still involved in it?
I didn't fund...
No.
Well, I funded all kinds of different schemes, but the point is...
to listen to you, because that's what you do. You alienate space. That's your job. So, of course, you're going to approve of it.
Well, look, I mean... I approve of it, providing it does public good. And if you take the example of the City Hall development, which I think you're going to be attending tomorrow, I mean, that used to be a pretty grotty space. We've now got City Hall there. We've got some offices.
I don't agree with you. It was actually very
jobs.
Interesting space. The problem with people like you is you're totalisers. You want everything to be monetisable.
What does that mean?
It's your job. You want everything to be totally the same. You have an idea of... It is. You look at that space now, yeah, it's pretty, it's antiseptic, but it is just like any other corporate space, Chris. Admit it. Widen your aesthetic lens.
Okay.
Well, I think the space around...
Go on, respond.
I think the space around City Hall... Well, I think the space around City Hall is actually one of the nicest spaces in London. It's got the river there, you can sit there and eat your sandwiches. And by the way, if ever the people who own that, whatever they're called, ever tried to restrict public access or harass the public, then I would be the first person to say that was wrong. And if anyone ever does that, the government and local authorities do have powers for compulsory purchase. So if ever a private owner does anything that's wrong or inappropriate, I would be the first person, probably with Will Self, to call for the land to be purchased back into public ownership using a compulsory purchase order.
Got to leave it there, guys. This is a public space. You can say what you like in the studio, but it may not be very pretty.
I've been getting away with it all